Hi all, Chris here. As promised, this is the first in what I plan to be a series on the Divine Evolution YouTube channel, expanding that and having more discussions and more in-depth discussions about, well, first of all, the origin of the Deems device, where that came from, and my involvement in the secret space program and the work that I did in that. And I haven't talked much about that on this channel, but that's what I'm going to start doing. So I'm going to try to do this particular video. I don't know how long it will be. I don't even know really what I'm going to say, except for I want to do an overview of my experience from prior to being born to today. So it's not going to have a lot of detail, but it'll just kind of tell you, what the experience is. That I wanted to go in depth later on. And then I'll do each individual episodes talking about different aspects. So it'll be several episodes long. So today what I want to discuss is my origin, the origin of my race, the people that I'm from. I've sought and looked into trying to find a name for the race. I don't know. I haven't been able to come up with one. The only answer I get back when I speak with guidance is, you have no name. The race has no name because they're so old they don't need one. Okay, all right, that works. So that's kind of where I'm coming from right now. But let me tell you a little bit about what I do remember about what my people do and what they've been doing. And that is, they are what I guess you could say are manufacturers of suns, meaning, big suns where solar systems develop around them. Now, the first question is, of course, how in the world can you develop a sun? Well, with the right technology and enough power, you can. And though many suns are, in fact, obviously created naturally out in the universe, the race that I come from, we have the knowledge and understanding of how to go to like a nebula or gaseous spaces in the universe where, like I think we call them star nurseries. We go into these spaces, and depending on the material in the gas clouds and the type of energy that's in the area, while these stars are being developed, all of these things determine how this race of beings interacts with them. And what they would do to interact with them is, because certain entities, certain races, certain life forms require certain light and certain energy to develop. And some of them go beyond just developing, but also continuing development. Say if their star is old and dying, they can create a new one. And then they can continue experience. And of course, that's highly complex and complicated, of which I don't have too many memories. But I do remember, actually, one particular memory. I was sitting in front of two individuals. It was like a small table right in front of us. Okay, like I'm facing them and we're quite close, but the little table's between us. And on that table is like a photo album, but it's not a photo album, but that's the closest thing I can come up with, and it was electronic. So you open this photo album, and these pages are quite thick, and so you open up a page, and then on the page itself is actually holographic. So you're looking into an image, and it would be an image of a sun, any given sun. And each page was a different color. And the different colors were different frequencies of light. There's different materials that the suns were burning. So they had each, it was like a sales book of suns is what it was, quite literally. So the first sun that I looked at, I opened the page to show these two people who were facing me, was probably like a yellow or a white or something like to that effect. And then I just turned the page, and then I said something like, oh, well, this is a really beautiful sun. And it was more of an orange sun, a deep orange sun. And then I flipped the page again, and I said, oh, this is a really beautiful sun. This one is amazing. I said, in fact, the entities that live in these suns are actually amazing. They look, what I asked them was, I said, so are you guys familiar with Earth? And they said, oh, yes, we've been there. And then I'm like, okay, well, then have you ever heard of what Earth calls sea monkeys? And they're like, we're not sure. And I said, well, it's like a little tiny crustacean. And then they're like, oh, yes, we know what you're talking about. I said, well, this sun, and this particular sun, was like a lavender light, very light color, violet maybe, something to that effect. And I said that the creatures that live within this sun, because many suns, if not all suns, house high density entities that are of that frequency and vibration, so they can live on that very, very hot space or sun. So I said, well, these entities live within this sun, and they look very similar to what Earthlings call sea monkeys. And I had another term, but I don't remember what it was. I said, except for the fact that they're about 30 meters tall. So they're much, much larger. So that's about 90 feet or so. And they're like, wow, that's amazing. I said, and the really beautiful part about these entities that live on the sun is that as they consume the energy of their sun, the vibration and the frequency that they put out, that they emit from the consumption of the materials in the sun, is love. And so they're like, wow, and they were really liking that. And then I turned the page one more time. And the interesting thing about these pages is, as you look into them, they're like, it's infinite. It's holographic. And you can just look into them forever. So I turned another page, and there's another sun, but this one was like a forest green or something, very dark, almost blackish green. I said, oh, this is a really beautiful sun as well. And I said, oh, so since you guys have been to Earth, then are you familiar with California? And he said, yes. I said, are you familiar with the kelp forests in California? And they're like, oh, yes, we are. I said, well, because the green, it was a very similar color. And as I said that, as I would say kelp, leaves, then this image would come out of the book of a piece of kelp. So it was like it was interacting and reacting to what I was saying. And the strange part about this was that the memory ends right there. And it was a really strange memory, but that was brought back to me recently through guidance. One of the times that they took me out of my body while I was asleep and was showing me some of my past experiences. This was one of them. And so they wanted me to express and explain or just tell people that, there is an amazing array of entities, of life forms out in the universe. And of course, I already knew that. I remembered that. But for some reason, guidance thought it was important that people knew that there's such an interaction in the universe that even suns can be manufactured. And I'm like, okay, yeah, that sounds pretty wild, but the memory was really amazing. So I was able to retrieve that memory recently. But I tell you this because I kind of want to build a foundation, because this particular race, that name I cannot recall, that I'm a part of, actually came to the United States government. I don't know if it was the Navy or the Air Force. It could have been either one or both. We actually visited them on a ship. And I believe this was an Earth ship, an American Earth ship. Because, I went with like several of my members of my little group. And this is a soul group. So our soul group or entities that we travel with throughout our lifetimes, we kind of come and go as part of the family, if you will, soul family, soul group. And we all incarnate at different times, and then the others stay back and assist as a guide or guidance. And this is the scenario. This was prior to my being born in 1968. We visited a U.S. military ship, and I believe it was a ship in space. Because as I recall, I believe I was looking on the right-hand side, walking in. So I walked into the room, and on the right-hand side, I believe was like a window or projector of what was out in front of the ship space, and it was the Earth. So I remember seeing the Earth. And then right in front of me was this long embankment, sort of like in, I guess, those old pictures of NASA when you had all these rows of just computer banks. They were all one long row and then a bunch of people sitting at them. It was sort of like that directly in front of me. And then to my left was a space that had another one of those computers, but it was facing me as I'm coming in the door. And right behind that, and that's like 2 steps elevated in the room. And then there was somebody behind that at a computer. And then there was a man standing behind this other person. And that man standing there was who we came to see. And I don't remember the details, of what we said, exactly. At least not at the moment. That could come later. But for the most part, we had this proposal. This was my bright idea, for whatever reason. We were proposing that that I wanted to incarnate on Earth, but then not just incarnate on Earth, but then be taken by the military and placed in their military programs. Now, the reason for this is it's important. This is an important thing to know when it comes to the purposes of incarnation, the purposes of life, and other races interacting with us as a human race and as a planet. So the benevolent forces have pretty much a hands-off watch and monitor and assist when possible or necessary, policy. So they don't come to Earth. They used to, but they no longer come to Earth. They probably came to Earth, 1,500 years ago or 1,000 years ago, but a lot of things went really wrong, so they kind of backed off. There's a lot of interference with some negative races, so it was causing more problems for humanity than it was solving. So they decided to back off and do a no-fly zone over the Earth for the most part. Now, there were many ships that were already here at that time, and they were not necessarily our friends. They were trapped on Earth. Once it's a grid, was placed up, and that's what all the pyramids were built for, was to tune the Earth and create a electromagnetic type of grid to keep other ships from coming in. So another long story I could go into, but I won't for now. So I'm telling you this because my race wanted to be involved in humanity, but we weren't allowed to come to Earth to do it anymore. Nobody was. But there is a loophole. The loophole is that you can be born into the race. So you can come in, incarnate as one of the members of the race, and continue and then have an experience. And so now you're considered an Earth human in this incarnation, and there's no interference that way. Because that's one of the other reasons we're all meant, and we do forget who we are, because that gives everybody an equal chance. And that's why I'm doing what I'm doing. That's why I'm saying these stories, telling my truths in a way that, I know it sounds pretty crazy at times, but it's meant to help people remember who they are. And I always say, you don't have to believe anything I say. It doesn't matter to me. I don't say what I say to be believed. I do say what I say to be heard. Because at some point in time in your life, my hope and desire is that something I say will make sense at some point, and that will be of service to you in your memory retrieval process. So that's the whole purpose of this. And then the reason everybody has to forget is so everybody's on an equal footing when you're born. And if you remember who you are, then you have to learn how to communicate that, or remember your mission, remember your desires. What is it that you'd like to do now that you're here on earth? Because even though we've planned everything ahead prior to incarnation as much as we can, we don't necessarily remember the details of how it is we want it to happen. So that can be a lot of frustration for us here on earth. It doesn't seem like we choose that. Maybe a negative experience, and we're like, I would never choose that for myself, so that doesn't make sense. So, when you're thinking in a much more galactic, higher spiritual mindset, then you would make choices that are uncomfortable while you're incarnate. And that's what we generally all do. So here I am. I say all of that so you can understand the concept of why we would go to the military prior to my even being born, and why I would be born on Earth as a human being. Now, because no other benevolent races are really allowed to interact on a physical level with people on Earth, even if they are part of the race, of your race, or soul family or soul group, you're still not allowed to interact with them. You can come to them in dreams, you can come to them telepathically, you can come to them in many other ways, but you can't necessarily appear to them or come into Earth without a reason. So that's why we don't normally see people, that are off planet popping in and out. We do, some people do, but so here I am. The plan was, we wanted to assist with disclosure on Earth. We wanted to help humanity evolve, because humanity is evolving right now. I was raised fundamentalist Christian, and in the Bible we believed in what we call the new Earth. And that's an Earth that rebuilds itself with all of the people that didn't quite make it. We believed in the heaven space. People that didn't quite make it to heaven, they can come back to the new Earth and continue their experience. Well, in a lot of ways, I have found that now to be true. After so many years of rejecting some of that information, I'm beginning to learn that it's actually correct now. So we came to Earth. Was born in 1968 in California, United States, and I remembered so many things, but not immediately, of course. Because when I was about 2 years old, and this actually gets into the SSP experience, when I was about 2 years old, I was in a crib, and it was dark in my room, I believe, or I don't remember it being light, but I was holding onto the rails of the crib, and I was looking over the top, I believe, and my parents were watching television. And it was black and white at the time. I remember that. And I think it was The Outer Limits, if I recall. So anyway, I'm standing there just, watching. Probably supposed to be asleep, but I wasn't. And suddenly there was a man that appeared right in front of me. Now this man was wearing all blue, like dark blue, navy blue, kind of that color. And he just appeared in front of me. And so he blocked out my view of looking out the doorway at the living room and the television and my parents. And then he reaches in and he picks me up under the shoulders, and he's kind of holding me out. And then the next thing I know, we're walking down a hall. He's walking and he's carrying me down a hallway. It was very bright. So it was kind of dark in my room, and then suddenly very bright. And I didn't know what was going on. I was like scared. I just remember being afraid. So long story short, and I'll get into the details of what they actually did, but to make a long story short for the moment, for this video, they took me in, they age advanced me, which they can do, and in another video I'll explain that in more detail. And they age advanced me to about a mid-25-ish, mid-20s young man. But I'm still a baby, 2 years old, brain. And so it was traumatizing and traumatic, of course. I don't remember much about it. I just remember it was quite difficult. It was emotional. I was frightened and I was cold. That's all I knew. But it was necessary, apparently, to age advance my body. And then they have technology to unlock memories. They can unlock memories because the memories are based in your DNA and they're time stamped with the time wave. So they did that, and then I suddenly remembered everything about why I was here on Earth. And I'm like, okay, I've got a mission to accomplish, but it wasn't quite that easy. It took some time. I worked for the first 20 years. I worked, I believe, mostly on Earth, because I remember deep underground military base. Some people call them DUMBs, D-U-M-B. And then I also remember being out in the desert on a small military base on the surface of the, with, trailers and, a building and stuff like that. And that was not a pleasant scenario. I was a guard. And then I also remember being taught how to extract memory from soldiers leaving the program. And I remember being taught telepathic work because my race is highly telepathic, so it came naturally. But because I'm now in a human brain, I had to teach the human brain how to be telepathic. So that was all that. So all of this stuff for the first 20 years is what I was experiencing here on Earth with the SSP. But after the first 20 years, and this was my main reason for doing this whole thing, is because I wanted to be a human being to represent humanity and Earth at a particular space station, and that was the space station just off of Saturn. It's just off the rings of Saturn, the very first moon, smaller than our moon. It's called Mimas, M-I-M-A-S. I don't know if the station was called Mimas, but that's what I remember it as, or where we were at least, because that moon, it's a natural body, but it was reworked, and it was reworked in the upper densities, meaning it really resides fully in the 8th density. And that 8th density, it's very much a metallic spaceship, and I'll tell you much more about it in the future, and I'll tell you, a lot of the details, and I can just express what it looks like and such as that. And I'll do that in another episode. But for now, I was there. So I remained on Mimas in the service of the Earth Alliance, Earth Embassy. I don't know if it was called necessarily the Alliance. I don't remember that, but it was an alliance of all the planet, or all of the countries on Earth, all the superpowers, and many of the smaller nations as well. They were all represented on this space station. Now, this space station was actually owned by, I don't know what race it was, but they're 8th density race, and they built it in the 8th density. And I know you wonder probably if here I am, a 3rd, 4th density being, visit a space station that's also 3rd density. It looks like a big rocky moon. How is it that we get to the 8th density? How is it we interact with a higher density when we're incompatible, and literally we would burn up in an instant if we just popped into it? That's an excellent question. How it works is that the Earth ships, and other ships, of course, but the Earth ships that we have also have these engines. There's a propulsion engine, but they have another engine, and I don't know what it was called technically, but I just refer to it as density engines. And then what you do in this density engine, so this 3rd, 4th density ship from Earth goes to Mimas, and there it is, a rocky moon, doesn't look like a space station at all. In order to dock with and interact with and get into the ship or into the station, you have to turn on this density engine. And what this engine does, it creates like a static electric plasma around the entirety of the ship, okay? So you flip on this density engine, and then you dial in the frequency of the density you want to visit. This all sounds really woo, I get it, but it's just science. And when you understand how to interact with frequency and vibration, it's easy if you have the technology, of course, which of course the United States does and other countries here on Earth. So anyway, so we get to the ship, this rocky moon, we turn on the density engine, set it to the 8th density or whatever density it is that we want to visit, and then we can dock with the station, and we can exit the station or the ship onto the station. Now the station, like I said, it's not as big as our moon, but it's a good size station, and there are many races that are there. And many of those races do not have the same atmosphere as we do. Some of them are even underwater. Some of them are in gaseous environments that are so dense you couldn't walk through it really. I mean, you could, but you'd probably dissolve. And so and temperatures, of course, are extreme ranges. So within this giant sphere, space station, you have all these other environments to accommodate everybody that's part of. It's called the Confederation of Planets. That's what I remember calling it. I also say the Coalition of Planets. So they're kind of the same thing. I don't know the official name. I just remember referring to it as the Confederation of Planets. That's just in my memory, so that's what I refer to it as. So what you do then is you remain in your environment in that, density that's so. As Earth human, when you exit the ship, and where the Earth embassy is in a 3rd, 4th density frequency, so we can be there and we can breathe the atmosphere. It feels a little different because you're dealing with a ship or a station with false gravity. And there's a connection which I don't recall right now. I don't know if I ever knew it, to be honest. There's a connection with magnetism, gravity, and density. And they can create environments where you have gravity on different levels. And I do remember as we're walking on some of these, in some of these areas, it felt softer, like you had a little bit less weight to your body. So it just... And then the air was like supercharged. Like if you're in an enclosed environment with like waterfalls and trees, you have that excited air, or you're at the ocean and the waves create this excitement in the air. That was the feeling that we had all the time. So I spent 40 years on Mimas. Now, if you're doing the math, it would be a total of 60 years. Now, that doesn't really add up. I'm not 60 years old now, of course. But how it works is this. Because they can create, and I say they, I mean, I refer to my experience, and my experience being Earth military, Earth especially, United States military, and their technologies. So they have the technology to clone, copy. And I like to say copy because it doesn't sound as bad, but it's just a copy of you. And because a clone can have alterations to it, and a clone can have, chemical changes, but a copy is an exact copy. So they'll grow from your DNA an exact copy of you as an individual. And that's what they did with me. So I was gone for 60 years, but they had a copy of me at 2 years old from when they took me. Now, they moved me at the end of my term, end of my service agreement. They moved me, took out my consciousness, and they erased my memory, because even though I had those 60 years of experience, when I was going to be brought back to Earth, I was going to be brought back as a 2-year-old. So they just deleted the memory because a 2-year-old doesn't really have memory. So that's what they did. And then I say, okay, well then, what did my family think, me being gone for 60 years? Because technically, if you're doing the math already, you know that the time hasn't elapsed yet. That time, the 60-year service agreement that I made doesn't end until 2030, another 5 years. So yeah, do the math. It's only been 55 years. So, excuse me, sorry. What they can do, because if you have to, they can do time travel. I can explain this in another video later, but the time travel is based on waves that they have already discovered. That time is based on a wave. It's an actual wave. It can be measured. And then it also, the wave as it travels through space, just imagine time. This is what Einstein was trying to say basically, was that it's a wave. And it has a density and gravity to it. Very minute, but it exists. And as it travels as a wave, there's a high point and a low point, a peak and a valley. And as it has a peak, it emits a frequency, or we call a timestamp. And then as it goes down into the valley, it creates another timestamp. And so as this wave travels, you can track any point in time within that time wave. And then if you know the location, geographical, three-dimensional three-dimensional space in time. Okay, so you have a three-dimensional space where you target and you vector it. So that would be my house in 1970. So they know where to go back to. And then when they go back to the time wave, they'll know in the moments that I was taken, they'll know what that timestamp wave was. And so then they can type in the computer the timestamp and the vector, the location. And then they punch that in, and I don't know what exactly the technology is. I don't have that memory right now. Maybe it'll come. But basically, you just walk through a doorway, and then you're there. So that's what they did. So after my 60 years in 2030, they will, and already have, take out my consciousness, because they can do that, and it's based on your pineal gland and your frequency and vibration, and I'll explain that in another video as well. They'll take it out and they'll put it in a copy. So they took it out of my adult body. They erased the memory of my being gone for 60 years, and then they put me in a 2-year-old copy of myself, which is where they took me. They took me at 2, and now they're putting me back in a 2-year-old. And then they take me back and they drop me off. The only thing that was different, because I don't think, not that I ever remember hearing about anyway from my parents, I don't believe I had any real missing time. So they got me back pretty close to the time they took me. But the only difference was I was in the closet. And I guess they couldn't figure out how I got in the closet. But, a 2-year-old, who knows? Can't close the door, reach the door. But anyway, so that's basically what happened. So in a nutshell, in a hopefully not too long video, that's the gist of my experience. But there are many experiences within that, and many spiritual lessons and understandings within that as well. Learning how amazing so many other races are, and the love they have for us, and the love that's available for humanity, if we could just get our act together. We can't love one another, so why would another race come in here and express love? I mean, yeah, they could come and teach us, but they've tried that. They tried that, for thousands of years, and it just didn't work. We are evolving, though, and that's the hope that I have. I know for a fact, I have no doubt that humanity, that the earth, that we will not only be okay, we will be amazing because we'll begin to remember the powers that we have as an individual human being and as a collective race. And that's my hope. And that's why I'm sharing this information with you. And I'm hoping that you will begin to remember more and more, and that you can learn to self-heal, and you can learn to heal from your past traumas. And that just opens you up more and more to the memories of who you are outside of this human body. Now, you may be a native Earth human. That's wonderful. That's amazing. But not everybody is. Some of us are different races that came here to be of assistance to Earth humans. But we're living the experience of an Earth human. So we, for all intents and purposes, we are Earth humans with you fighting the good fight. And that's my hope, that we can come together and find a way through love, understanding the many facets of love, and know how to get along and evolve as a race so that our brothers and sisters, from off planet will feel comfortable coming and without feeling threatened with violence. Okay? All right. Well, that's it for now. I love you all so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you for being a part of my journey of remembering. And I hope I can be here and available to you as well. And I will put up my email for you guys, and or maybe the company, logo or company web address, which is easy. It's deemsdevice.com. It's also deemscompany.com. And that'll take you to Light Love Media, which is the parent company. So, and that's me. You can contact me through there if you have any questions or support. And if you have memories, please write them down and send them to me. I'd love to hear about it. And I love you guys. You take care. Bye-bye.